Big unveiling now of the 5 finalists for the Knight of the North Award. This is the Northern Heisman. We're going to hand this out every year. This is the first one that's going to be handed out. It's being handed out now by what Landis and I say. I think down the road, we would like to have voters. We would like to have it be a little more of a process. We'd like to have it be a thing, right? They hand out the Earl Campbell Texas Award for like the best player from Texas. There's things that we're not pretending, Landis, that this is eventually going to be quite at the Heisman level.
No, not close, but not.
But at the tier below that, which is everything else.
That's right. Yeah, and they get people to go to Tyler, Texas for the Earl Campbell Award. We can certainly get them to come to Medieval Times in New Jersey to get the Knight of the North Award.
Yeah. I can't wait. We still got. Do you have a number for the Medieval Times corporate headquarters? We'll get that.
I'll find it. Yeah.
Where are you on Knight of the North? Is that the best name for this for sure?
If I'm being honest, I liked King of the North.
I kind of like King of the North too. So, yeah, we'll work it out. I mean, sometimes when things are started, like you change the name. But we understand what it is, which is the best football player for a Northern football team. We are characterizing that right now as our 28 teams, which is 14 from the Big Ten and another 14 not in the Big Ten. We may add teams for next year. We've talked about that. Will we add Missouri? Will we add Kansas or Kansas State? Will we add Virginia Tech? Will we add Louisville? Right. So then if you're in, you're eligible. But we have, from those 28 teams, we have chosen 5 guys that we now have as the finalists. Actually, let's talk about this now. I really want to make a push. Like, I want to put pressure on the Heisman to move the Heisman to after the entire season starting next year, because I think a world where they hand out the Heisman and then teams play potentially 4 more games in the playoff is crazy to me. So I think the 2 choices have to be you move the Heisman back and take everything into consideration, or we really truly acknowledge is that the Heisman is a regular season award. And then somebody, and maybe it'll be us, comes up with a postseason college football award that also has great value and prestige. And this is only the guys who are playing for one of the 12 playoff teams are eligible, and it is based on your value and performance in the playoff. I would be okay with that also. But to me, the idea of, well, the Heisman's the Heisman, that's the thing that matters, but we hand it out. And then, because in college football, all those stats count for the regular season. There's not as much of a distinction as there is with professional sports, unless they start a distinction where they don't count your, like they've got to figure something out, because right now, in some ways it's smushed together, but with the Heisman, it's not smushed together. So I think I want us for now to hand our award out after the playoff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I want to too, especially because we're gonna have a couple. Well, I guess maybe only one of our finalists ends up playing in it, but I think we should do that. Yes, I think that's a proper way to do it, because we don't have. I'm trying to think like across other sports, right? Hockey does it. Hockey has the Hart Trophy for regular season MVP, and then the Conn Smythe Trophy for the playoff MVP. But I don't know that a lot of other sports do that, right? Like there are championship series MVPs, but not like a total postseason MVP award.
So like college football has to get this figured out. I think moving the Heisman makes the most sense. And like people say, well, if you move that, because I had this argument on my last show where I went bonkers with my former co-host Shahan on the College Football Survivor show, and it was the most like I ever yelled at him, and he was like, "Oh, this is what yelling at guys Doug is like," because I was so staunch on they've got to move the Heisman. And he was like, well, then it'll just always go to somebody on a playoff team. But as it is right now, conference championship weekend is incredibly important. It almost right now already goes only to somebody who plays conference championship weekend. So like we're willing to make that distinction, that there are some guys in the mix who get an extra game on the biggest stage, and there are some guys who don't, but we're not willing to make that distinction for the playoff. That's insane to me.
Yeah, I agree. That does. I'm with you. You don't have to yell at me. We're on the same team here. Does any part of
Landis? Oh, come on.
Does that? I don't think this is any part of your motivation for doing this, but Do you think moving the Heisman to the end of the season could have an impact on guys deciding to play in like bowl games and stuff when they otherwise wouldn't?
I think making things matter is a motivation.
Yeah.
And so if you're in the Heisman mix, but you're not in the playoff, but you decide, well, I kind of want to win the Heisman. I better go throw for 450 yards in the guaranteed rate bowl. Yeah. And I'm not saying you're ineligible if you opt out, but I'm saying you're giving up your last chance to make a case, and that's your decision. And so a year ago, it was like, well, if you had waited, what if Stetson Bennett would have won the Heisman? And it's like, is that any worse than Caleb Williams winning the Heisman? Did you see what Caleb Williams did this year? Caleb Williams' team lost his bowl game. Like, what? Why are we offended that Stetson Bennett would have won the Heisman over Caleb Williams if we had waited until after the playoff last year? What's wrong about that?
It's better process, right? I don't. It's almost like it's forcing Heisman voters to pay more attention to college football, which I'm in favor of.
And with 12 teams in the playoff instead of 4, there's more good guys on good teams who will get a shot. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do this after it's all over. But for now, we're announcing. So I guess we are announcing by announcing finalists, though, if you're not a finalist, it doesn't matter what you do in the playoff, you can't win. By our rules that
we just made up. This
is not one of those watch lists where when we vote on awards, it's always like, here are the 10 finalists, or just write somebody in. It always says that.
Yeah.
We're not just going to write somebody in. I also think that's not a bad way to do it. That if the Heisman said, here are 5 finalists, now one of these 5 is going to go win. You could do that now. So then it's not only based on the playoff. That it's like, well, you went nuts in the playoff, but your regular season did not put you in one of the 5 finalists, so you can't win. Actually, we just solved it. Isn't that a good solution?
That is a good solution. And the Heisman's weird. Like you said, like every award gives you an option to write somebody in, but they also give you a list of like the guys you should be considering. The Heisman does not do that. The Heisman says, here's 3 spots, write 3 names.
You could follow the process as it is right now, where you announce the 5 Heisman finalists, and I make it 5, and you could have those 5 guys go to New York now if you wanted to, or you could just announce the 5 now and then have all 5 go at the end of the year. Okay, we're going to solve this for them. They are old and stodgy, and I'm already fighting with them because they have a person in charge of picking the voters in Ohio who has not covered college football as his primary job in like 10 years. And I yelled at them about that, and they were just like, thanks, Doug. And I was like, sorry for trying to make your process better, Heisman. So the result of this may be that they take my vote away because I'm so cranky about this, but maybe the result is that I change the Heisman for the better. Yeah, I actually probably would bet on take my vote away.
They can't take your vote away for the Knight/King of the North, though.
That is right, which is what we're talking about. That's right. Oh, you can take my vote away? We made our own award. We're going to hire Stetson Bennett, college football lawyer, on our behalf to like sue the Heisman on behalf of the Knight of the North. All right, number 1 finalist for Knight of the North is Joe Alt, Notre Dame left tackle. He's the highest graded offensive lineman, not just offensive tackle, in all of the Power 5. He's given up 1 sack the whole year. He's a 3-year starter. He is the best offensive lineman in college football, Landis, yes or no?
I think so. Yeah, there are other guys in the conversation. I suppose quite a few of them in the North, right? We have a lot of good offensive linemen on our teams here, but I think he's clearly the best. And he also he came into the season with a lot of hype and people wanting to see him perform like the best offensive lineman in the country. And I think he more than lived up to it. Like sometimes you put that on a player, they come into the season, it doesn't quite live up to expectations. He certainly has. I know Notre Dame's season has not gone the way that certainly they hoped it would, and maybe some others thought that it would, but I think Joe Alt has played like an All-American, best left tackle, best offensive lineman in college football all season.
And we want our award to be like this. We want to bring in non-skill players to the discussion in a way that the Heisman rarely does, especially when it comes to offensive line, right? Orlando Pace, yes, but like very rarely beyond that. And that we're really trying to acknowledge like the best, most impactful, most valuable football player. It doesn't have to be a quarterback.
No, it doesn't have to. I think it's hard, right? It's hard to discern who is like the best offensive lineman and then like try to compare him to a skill player. I understand that, there are stats and then there are your eyes and it's hard to match the two up sometimes. But we will always give not reserve a spot for an offensive lineman. I don't think that's what we're trying to do, but we are going to keep an open mind when we do this, because offensive linemen deserve to be considered for awards like this far more often than they are.
All right. That's one of 5 finalists. Finalist number 2 is Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback from Washington, second in the nation in passing yards with 3,899, 32 touchdown passes. That's fourth. And this certainly matters. Led Washington to its first undefeated regular season since 1991. I am always very much of the idea that how your team does matters for this, right? That your excellence created something bigger. It doesn't mean that somebody from a 7-5 team can't be in our mix here. But, if Washington was 10-2, I don't know if Penix would be here, because he started off like statistically in a spectacular fashion, and the second half of the year has kind of trailed off a bit, but Washington's still winning.
Yeah, and I think if you watch those games, even if Michael Penix is not playing quite to the same level he was earlier in the year, he's still finding ways to help Washington win these games. Like he's run the ball a little bit in a couple other big games. If he's not been deadly accurate for the entirety of a game, he's managed to make a handful of big throws that swing the game in Washington's favor. So yeah, I'm with you. Like the statistical output is still pretty gaudy and catches your attention. But if you watch the way the Washington season has played out, there's a little bit of a gamer element to Michael Penix too that I think has emerged here on the back half of the season that I would take into consideration when we're trying to figure out who deserves an award like this.
They wouldn't be where they are without him.
No.
He's the driving force of what they do. They have a lot of excellent skill players. They have some great defensive players, but Michael Penix has made it happen. So I think he absolutely deserves to be one of the 5 finalists here. All right, number 3. I do think I agree. King of the North. Probably going to change it. We're going to change it. Number 3 is Jerzon Newton of Illinois. And again, this is what we want to do here when it's deserved. He's a defensive tackle, 7.5 sacks and 44 pressures, according to PFF. That leads all Power 5 defensive tackles. And it's just a little different world for an edge rusher versus a defensive tackle. He does not come off the field. He has played 100 more snaps than any other defensive tackle in the North, which that's like 10 snaps a game more, that he is just out there. This is a position, Landis, where a lot of teams rotate, right? It's hard to play defensive tackle. This guy is a beast. He's also blocked 4 kicks. So, he is a game wrecker, and I think consistency and ceiling, this dude is rare.
He is rare. And the sheer number, like the workload is astonishing for this position, because he's a big guy at defensive tackle. The motor is incredible. Like when a guy plays as much as Johnny Newton has played, you expect the play to like taper off at some point, and that really hasn't happened. And Illinois did not have the best season, but if you go through and watch some of their key games, he no doubt took over. And even maybe their most heartbreaking loss of the season was the game that they lost to Wisconsin, when Wisconsin, I think, scored like 21 or so straight points to win that game. All of that happened after Johnny Newton got ejected. Like he was controlling that game, I think, for Illinois. And then you pull him out of there, and all of a sudden they can't handle Wisconsin and end up losing a game that kind of doesn't derail their season, but they're left a little disappointed here because they didn't get a win in that particular game. And that's the kind of difference.
They're not going to a bowl,
right? Yeah, that's the kind of difference that a guy like this makes. So maybe less obvious to people around the country. I think not to people who pay attention to Northern football. They know this guy's a force, so I think he had to be here.
And we've certainly, with what Georgia has done with defensive tackles lately, right, from Jordan Davis to Jalen Carter to Devontae Wyatt, like people understand how impactful they are. But again, in 21, when Georgia was trying to find its Heisman candidate, and they were sort of presenting Jordan Davis as their Heisman candidate, he played like 350 snaps that year. Johnny Newton's played 700. He plays twice as much. And that doesn't mean like, oh, he compiles more stats. It means like he plays at that level twice as often. I thought that was a really tough thing about the Jordan Davis case. It's like, man, he's not even on the field half the time, because that's the norm at defensive tackle, because it's such a grueling position. This guy is outside the norm, which is why I think he certainly deserves to be one of the 5 finalists. All right, finalist number 4 is Bo Nix. Oregon quarterback, leads the nation in passing yards, 3,906, 37 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, 37 touchdowns a second, 70.8% completion percentage, which is best in the nation, Landis. Again, driving force. And I think he's played better in the second half of the year when Michael Penix has maybe played better in the first half of the year. He's obvious he's got to be in here.
Yeah, I want to compare that a little bit when we talk later on about the Pac-12 championship, but it's clear that Bo Nix I think has played like Jaden Daniels is absurd. So maybe he is the guy, but in terms of playing meaningful games, I think Bo Nix has been the best quarterback in college football over the second half of the season. And it's also a cool story, right? He what goes to Auburn is like a 5-star guy who people thought was going to be the savior of that program. He's a legacy there. It doesn't quite work out. Transfers, and I think when he transferred to Oregon, people kind of thought he was a bust, and had a really good first season at Oregon, and then has elevated even more this year, playing for one of the better teams in college football. So absolutely, like, slam dunk had to be on this list, and I would probably say at the moment he's the favorite.
Number 5, Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. 9th in the nation in receiving yards with 1,211. Tied for second in the nation with 14 receiving touchdowns. That's tied for first in the North. He's had 8 games, Landis, of 100 receiving yards or more. That includes against Michigan on Saturday. Ohio State, the last 3 seasons, has entered the Michigan game with the player with a fairly compelling case for any national award. And then they've lost to Michigan. And that absolutely is a factor, but I didn't think it was enough of a factor for Marvin Harrison Jr. to not make our top 5.
No, I don't think so either. And we'll talk about some guys who are like just missing the cut here. But one of them was Rome Odunze, right, the receiver at Washington. And there's probably a compelling case to make between he and Marvin in terms of, like, if you say, like, okay, we have a spot for one receiver on this list, who's going to get it? Like, I hear you out, but I think Marvin, similar to Michael Penix, has, like, sort of been the driver behind a lot of Ohio State's success this season. And I know they came up short, but to get as much attention as he does, and for everyone in the world to know that kind of Ohio State's offense goes as he goes, and then to still be as productive as he was this season, made me totally comfortable with Marvin being here. I think even though they didn't get the job done against Michigan, he played well, and he deserves to be here.
Ohio State had been mounting a Heisman case for Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not going to win in a world where they didn't beat Michigan and Ohio State's not playing on championship weekend. Do you think he gets to New York?
So they can send up to 5, right?
Yeah. I think it is just 5 now. I think they said a couple years ago it's always going to be 5.
Yeah, I could see it. If it's like Nix and Penix and Jaden Daniels.
I think it depends what Milroe does in the SEC championship game.
Carson Beck is going to get consideration too if he plays well. Yeah. So maybe it's like one of the quarterbacks from the SEC championship and then like a 5th spot. I could see that being Marvin.
I think it's possible. Yeah. Okay, so those are our 5 finalists for the best Northern football player. Joe Alt, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. 2 Pac-12 quarterbacks, Michael Penix Jr. at Washington, Bo Nix at Oregon. Jerzon Newton, the defensive tackle at Illinois, and Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. Landis, who were the guys that were like right there? Because I think we would have been willing to go to a 6th finalist. I think more than 6 is unwieldy. Who just missed it?
Yeah, Rome Odunze, the receiver from Washington, who I just mentioned, was certainly in strong consideration. I think Damian Martinez, the running back at Oregon State, who we like a lot. We've talked a lot about throughout this season. We've had him on the in-season list quite a few times. Just a really productive player, and again, a guy who is behind a lot of the success for an Oregon State team that had a good season. Cooper DeJean, the defensive back, cornerback, special teams ace from Iowa, who we like mid-season, I think, came around and was like, okay, we got to keep this guy at the front of mind when we're thinking about this. And then he unfortunately got hurt, and Iowa kind of just kept winning despite that. So if we had a list that was out to 10, like Cooper DeJean, I think would no doubt be on it. But the injury played a factor there as well. And then Jonah Ellis, the pass rusher from Utah, who I believe still leads the North in sacks and is among the national leaders in sacks and pressures, had a really productive season for an excellent Utah defense, but he also got hurt at the end of the season. So that hurt his chances as well.
Yeah, I think a healthy Ellis or a healthy DeJean might have been the 6th guy here. JJ McCarthy at Michigan. Michigan's a little bit in the Georgia spot of like, hey, you're a great team, but like, who's your awards guy? Right? Last year, it clearly was Blake Corum, and then he got hurt at the end of the year, and that kept him, I think, from being a Heisman finalist. I would have loved to acknowledge Michigan by putting one of the Wolverines in our finalist list, but who should it have been? Like, who is Michigan's best player?
Yeah, they just have a lot of really good ones. There's no one who jumps out. It's like you could pick like one of the like Chris Jenkins or Mason Graham maybe, or like
A
Mike
defensive
Saint
tackle.
Mike Sainer still. I don't know. They're kind of nickel safety guy. Do you pick like Zach Zinter, their guard who got hurt against Ohio State and I'm assuming is out for the rest of the year based on how nasty that looked? Like I don't know. Like I don't think JJ's play has like risen to the level of the other guys we've talked about here. And sheer production for really anyone on Michigan's roster hasn't either. It feels weird to not have a Michigan representative, but I guess it's a testament to Michigan that they kind of get the job done with the whole rather than a couple of individuals leading the way.
And again, Georgia's been in the same spot. One of the more complicated things about the Heisman race the past couple of years is that Georgia has been the dominant team, and Georgia has not really presented a typical Heisman candidate in the way that often it's like, well, who's going to win the Heisman? I don't know. The quarterback of the best team, the best player of the best team. And when you have a team like Georgia, and I think Michigan is very similar, where you have 12 really good players, but you don't have anybody who's going to be the first pick in the draft, right? That just makes it difficult sometimes. So those are our 5. We will announce the winner when the full season is over, like a normal organization would do. Heisman Trophy Trust.